But we secular thinkers must be on the watch for keeping reason alive. The forces of darkness, ignorance, and intolerance never cease their attempts to turn back the clock. Rational people and their principles are in a crucial war against creationism. We must fight and defeat the irrationalism of the various forms of creationism swiftly and decisively in the courts, in the classrooms, in our United States, and in our world. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
See how strident she is at the end there?
Yes, I was almost about to throw out.
Yes, you work this up.
Just strident.
Have you read much Stephen Jay Gould?
Yeah, I like him, although a lot of people don't. You know, a lot of atheists really don't like him at all because of his thing about the two magisterium. And it's very controversial as a result. But frankly, I've always liked Gould, but I see now that they've found some of his theories were cockeyed, and that's kind of scary. I don't know.
Like what? Like what? Yeah.
Well, like, what's the thing where he showed the evolution of like animals with spines, little mammals with spines? What's the name of that?
The Cambrian.
The shale.
The one about the kick. The
Yeah.
Burgess shale.
Yeah, Burgess shale. Yeah, they say that was incorrect. And there's other things now that are being disputed, so I don't know. I like him a lot. I think he's really interesting.
When he was writing about the Burgess shale, it was all pretty cutting edge stuff, I think.
But you know what? A lot of it's been discredited.
But even so, I mean,
Yeah.
okay, so.
I was very excited.
On the cutting edge, he
Yeah.
got some of it wrong.
I was excited.
I like
when
Gould a
read it.
lot.
Yeah. Some people are now calling him like, an imposter almost, like false theories, I think that they're overdoing it.
I think so too.
But,
That's
you know.
ridiculous. In fact, I like Gould a lot. I'm a lot less impressed with Dawkins.
Yeah, I
than-
know. I don't
than
like him
many
as well either.
atheists are.
Why
I
is
agree
that?
with you. I don't like him that much either.
I
He's very important.
came across Dawkins first when he was writing popular science books about evolution.
They were interesting,
We have
weren't
Gould,
they?
we have Dawkins, we have
Yeah.
back and forth, lots of fun.
Yeah.
He wasn't known so much as being an atheist in particular. He didn't
You're
get
right.
into those debates. In those books, I thought Dawkins' style was the written equivalent of raising your voice to get your point across.
I never thought that. I was surprised when he came out as like a, such a diehard atheist because I found him very reasonable
I thought he
and measured.
was a loudmouth and not measured.
And
What
before,
book
when
are
he
you
wrote, when
referring
he
to?
was writing his early science stuff, not later
Yeah.
when he became like, a
wrote-
wild atheist.
He wrote the
Selfish
Blind
Gene?
Watchmaker.
Yeah,
was
Blind
one of his
Watchmaker
books.
and,
Selfish gene.
Selfish Gene.
Selfish Gene.
But that was
That-
pretty late in the game.
yeah,
Right.
but that
That
was
was strident.
fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was,
Yeah.
did you just think that was strident? I didn't. I found it very interesting.
I mean, I agree with most of it, but yeah, I felt that
Yeah, I
he
thought
was
so.
selling
That's
right.
atheism.
interesting. Oh, even back
The
then?
obviousness.
Well, I mean, I thought he
Same.
was, but he didn't get really bad till later, I mean, in terms of being like thing. A big argument that he had with Gould was that, Gould didn't want this kind of like atheist fundamentalism, as he called it. Yeah.
I don't remember that phrase. What does
Mixing.
that mean?
He actually,
Mixing the science with the politics.
yeah, well, actually, I think, sometimes, Jim and I went to that lecture that, where Dawkins was in East
Michigan
Lansing.
State.
He's got this almost dogmatic point of view that, evolution, as we have seen it, is like almost inevitable, and I think it could be very different, and I think that Gould was more, what am I
Good.
trying to say?
Reserved.
Gould constantly said it could have turned out differently.
Yeah,
He wrote a book
Dawkins
called
doesn't believe it.
Five Little Piggies.
Yeah.
And the point of the book was it didn't have to turn out that way at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
5 fingers, 5 toes, forget
Yeah.
it.
Right, it's
Yeah.
not so much survival of
Yeah.
the fittest.
Yeah,
Fit
Dawkins,
enough.
Dawkins is pretty fundamental about that. Jim and I kind of looked at each other
Yeah, like, what's he
at that lecture.
pulling?
It was
Yeah.
a sentence that he gave, and I can't quote it exactly, but we said, boy, that's awfully
That's a little
dogmatic.
stiff.
Yeah, that's why I
Because
like.
what he's saying is that it's universal. There's no question, to him, there's no question that what happened here is universal.
Yeah, he didn't
But
quite say it that way,
well,
but it
it's
was
not what
pretty.
you certainly could take it
Yeah.
that way.
But I always liked Gould.
I love Gould.
Yeah.
I thought he had, I could sympathize with this, that he didn't want to offend his family and his
Yeah.
friends, you know?
Yeah.
He had this Jewish background.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, in the religious sense, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And he didn't want to piss everybody
Yeah,
off,
yeah.
so he wanted to play nice with religion, the two magisteria.
Yeah.
You can do your religion over there, don't bother me,
Yeah.
but I won't bother you.
I'll do
you
my
know?
science over.
But it ain't gonna happen that way.
But it
Yeah,
doesn't
really.
happen
Yeah.
that way, you know, so he was kind of unrealistic. I don't know, you know, I'm worried about some of his theories not holding up, and some of his information,
Well,
some
that's
of
just
his.
science. I mean, things
Yeah,
that you get
I
out of
know,
Darwin
but-
had silly ideas too about.
Yeah, of
genetics.
course, yeah, of course, but still at the same time, you know, I'm a little, you know, hesitant. I used to defend him with the magisteria, and now I'm a little, well, you know.
Oh, I never cared much about the magisteria, that was.
It was kind of silly, I thought it was
I
kind of silly.
thought he was just.
Yeah, well, he was a departmental head, which
Yeah.
means that he would be,
So
you
now-
know, I think he would be like more of a consensus person.
Yeah,
You know, you gotta, if you're a department head, you gotta like bring all these people together and make, you know, like some peace between them so they're
Mhm.
not killing each other.
Yeah.
And I think that was his personality. And I think Dawkins was never like a department head. He was always like this, you know,
Right.
research biologist.
yeah, Dawkins, I just think of him as a, grow up, Richard,
I
come
don't-
on, get over it.
He's the god of the atheists, because he's
Uh-huh.
funded so much stuff. I don't know if you've noticed that when you
100%.
talk to any atheists.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, they
have,
go
really.
crazy.
Yeah.
Not only, well, I kind of think Madeline Murray was a little loud.
Oh, she was
too,
terrible. She
you
was an
know.
awful woman.
Yeah.
I mean, we owe her a lot. We owe her a lot because, I mean, she brought these cases and they were very important, but as a person,
Yeah.
she was terrible.
She
Read
was
some of them.
horrible.
If you ever want to read
Horrible.
any of the books about her, God, I
Yeah.
have one of them, I think, in my, or did I even cite any of those? No, I think I cited her personal, some of her personal books, but
Strengths and weaknesses, I lost track of what that is. Is it an actual pamphlet or a set of text?
no, they've issued a lot, they probably have some pamphlets to tell you the truth. What they're trying to do is saying, well, this is okay with evolution, but this is weak. Like, nobody can explain yet they don't say yet, nobody can explain the Cambrian.
Yeah, right.
Yes, the explosion, you know.
But it's just a general idea.
Right,
not
right, yeah,
anything
I think
specific.
once again,
Okay.
they're being very clever, and, you know, they're just trying anything that they can. It's like really disgusting. But,
This is, did this come up in Florida, perhaps, where there was legislation? But I remember Rubio was asked about this,
I wouldn't be surprised.
because
Yeah.
of some legislation or something to do what you're describing.
Yeah, it's come up all over now, I mean, because they're trying to put it in all these books in the South and what have you. Actually, it's starting to, like, I just heard it on the news today, and it wasn't even about evolution or creationism. It was, so I think it's, you know, entering the popular jargon, which I don't know, may be a good thing, you know, because it'll weaken it kind of. I said, oh my gosh, people are using strength and weakness, and it has nothing to do with evolution, nothing to do with science, and some other silly thing.
You got can you recommend a book by this Thomas Dixon that I should look at?
Yeah, I have him in the bibliography.
Is that on the atheist.org, the org.org site?
Yes,
or
yes, it
.org?
is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
That's the
Jim
best
didn't
bet.
print of those, yeah.
That's fine,
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
There's two really good books, yeah. In fact, one is like the short introduction to evolution,
Yeah,
and that's very good. And then he has a much longer one that's like, you know, he's excellent. And I'll tell you, he's not a real atheist proponent. He's really pretty measured.
yeah.
In fact, when Jim read him, you know, Jim said, I think he's somewhat of a Christian. I said, well, I'm not sure about that, but he's pretty fair, you know.
Yeah, that's I'm big on fear. Eugenie Scott claims she can, that is a she, right?
Yeah, she's very, very good. Yeah, she's got a wonderful book, Evolution versus Creationism.
And she claims she can find flat earth creation.
Yeah, I guess there's about, how many did she say left in her book? I think she said that there were about, they claim to have about 600, I think, members.
Well, good grief.
What is it about the Bible, though, that they would cite to say that the earth is flat?
Well, isn't it the rising of the sun or whatever, don't they, and then didn't, oh gosh,
That
I
the
don't
sun
remember.
stood
that.
still, or?
Yeah.
That the only way that could be is.
It's,
if
I
they were
remember it
flat.
in the Old Testament, I can't tell you where. Do you remember it? I remember it.
No, I don't remember an argument. I do remember the argument for pi equal to 3. So I'm a
Okay.
mathematician.
Oh, yeah,
so
I can tell.
Remember this.
So Obama just cited the flat earth people today when
He
he
did.
was talking about global warming. He says
I
this is
didn't
not a
listen to
meeting
him.
of the flat earth society.
Oh, great, yeah, see, that is what still
So
exists.
It's entered the popularist.
I
lexicon.
suspect that they don't have 600 members.
You can find 600 people who believe about anything.
They say in the United States, if you just say that you're starting a society for anything, you'll get a couple of members. you
Yeah,
know? So,
I'm not too impressed with that. I think that tale of distribution can be just ignored,
yeah.
you know.
Well, what she does is she takes, she starts there and then works up to the, the more scientific, the people that accept the more scientific theories.
What is the blood clotting cascade? I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not very good at this, but it's the way the blood clots, and that's what they call it. And again, what the intelligent design people are saying, that it's so complex
Yeah.
that if you removed any portion of the way everything interacts in that cascade,
Wouldn't clot.
that it wouldn't clot. Yeah, exactly. And it's a lie, because they found other things that are very close to it and that don't have all those.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the bacteria flagellum. It's the same thing. They keep saying that, oh no, you can't remove any parts.
What
So
is flagellum? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I remember. I knew what it was.
I think they move around that way. It's
Yeah.
like a tentacle.
Yeah, it's a tail.
Okay.
It's a tail
Yeah.
kind of.
Right.
It's a silly thing
And
to
it
call it. but
wiggles
yeah.
and that
Yeah.
causes the thing to move.
Yeah. And they keep making these points that everything is too complex to, remove
Yeah.
one part or two parts and it's over, but that's not true.
Well, I always got a kick out of the old, what good is half an eye? The eye's too complex. Well, what really kills me is that, now I cannot remember the names involved here, but there was somebody like Dawkins, for instance, who said in one of his books, what good is half an eye? He repeated, here's the challenge, what good is half an eye? Then he spent the rest of the chapter explaining what good is half an eye.
Yeah.
And then you'll get somebody like Morris will write one of his tracts that says, even the biologist Richard Dawkins, I had him right here, said, what good is half an eye? You see, I've caught them.
They do that. They do that all the time.
Yeah.
They even have shown they had asked Dawkins a question, and I can't remember what it was with the creationists, and he hesitated like any intelligent person would do to gather his thoughts.
Gather his thoughts.
So they showed it on thing that whoever had asked the question,
Smells great.
had stymied Dawkins. Look at Dawkins came.
Stumped.
Yeah, stumped.
Stumped.
I can't see
Look at
stumped
this,
Dawkins.
yeah, stumped,
Stumped.
but they love to do
And-
that. They're just continuous. Well, they're very challenged. They're very threatened. I mean, they keep being pushed back. I mean, the more that they say, look at these gaps, the more the gaps are filled in.
Yes.
Pretty soon they're gonna know how the blood clotting cascade works, they're gonna know how the Cambrian explosion happened. There's already, like explanations, given. I don't think that they're probably as accurate, but they will be sometime.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
I know some Catholics anyway, who long ago just gave up, okay, I can't fight it. But they fall back on, well, why is there something rather than nothing?
Oh, I hate
Just for a first
Yeah.
cause.
Oh, I
you
hate
know.
that, yeah.
Well, okay, but if somebody wants to argue that, I say, yeah, go, let's have a beer. I mean, who wants to argue a thing like that?
But that's how they try to debate evolution, isn't it? By
Well,
saying, well, what
no,
created
no,
life?
what I'm saying is that they're falling back, they're not really fighting evolution.
Yeah.
They just want there
Yeah.
to be a God.
Mhm.
They don't want atheists to win.
Yeah, really, I mean, a lot of them accept evolution. Norman, when I was working the no-circ booth at the, not at Pride, but at the Deli in the Alley last year, this guy wanted to argue with me. I finally kind of blew him off so he would move on, but his whole point was, no, I accept evolution,
You got on that topic.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I accept evolution, but you know, but, you know, God, you know, started it all, you know, and then, you know, you're back.
The God of the gaps, that's the God of the
Yeah,
gaps.
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
it's just the God of, it's just the God of first cause.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's all they want
First
now.
cause, right?
So
Yeah.
it goes to show how defeated they are in a way.
Well, yeah, and if they want to retreat to that position, it's fine, I don't
Yeah.
care.
No, I don't care.
That's really being pushed back.
You know, yeah, that's,
The only trouble is when they, you know, when they're aggressive about putting it in the schools or taking,
That's right.
you know,
Yeah.
and that is scary. And I mean, they are aggressive and they have a lot of money. And another thing that I resent about them is that, you know, they're causing us to waste a lot of money, our secular groups.
yeah.
Now, I don't want to get off science, but there's an important case now, Americans United is taking. They'll probably be joining forces with other atheist groups, but it's in Greece, New York, of all places.
Yeah, Greece, New York.
Yeah,
yes.
and they're
City council
city council, it's government endorsed.
opened their proceedings, each proceeding, with a public prayer
Yeah.
on government property.
It's almost always Christian.
And it's always Christian.
Well,
Oh, yeah,
not everything, I
right,
think
right.
almost.
90%.
90% of them have been Christian. And this is the first time the Supreme Court has heard a case like this in 30 years. So this is important.
Do you know, I know, of course, there were people who believed in divine right of kings, and
Yeah.
I didn't actually know that there were people that ranked kings
Oh,
above
yes.
humans in the chain of
Yes.
evolution.
It's a divine, well, actually, it's the divine chain of being, they used to call it.
Yeah.
And it went on forever. It was like very, very prevalent during Shakespeare's time, you know, during the Renaissance. And it didn't go out till about almost the Enlightenment. It really hung on forever.
Very
And they
disturbing
ranked
for people
everything.
to step outside that.
They ranked everything, the types of angels, you know, like
Oh, yeah, the
archangels versus, yeah, and all the way down to like
Angels
stones
had
and
a-
stuff, to
they had-
inanimate objects. And this is it, everybody is in this chain, God created it, he's at the top, obviously, and everybody is in their place.
I know, angels have a very deep minor league
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, they do.
On down.
Well, that was the, you know,
But how many
divine-
people believe that,
Yeah,
I mean,
almost everybody,
divine right of kings?
yeah.
How, well,
Well, and let's put it this way, people that didn't kept their mouths shut.
maybe.
Because, you know, it's interesting, Norm and Jim are gonna get sick of this, but,
Microsoft when it's over.
okay, I was at a lecture at the Grosse Pointe Library, and they have a very good literature lecture series, and the lady was a really excellent professor from U of M, but when I raised the point of perhaps Marlo being an atheist, she said she disagreed with it. Now, I don't think probably Marlo was an atheist, but her position was that there weren't atheists at that time.
Who was it?
She was a professor from U of M.
But you're saying the position?
Marlo, I'm sorry, Christopher
Oh,
Marlo.
Christopher Marlo, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So she just said that that wasn't in their thought pattern. But indeed, you know, as we've been learning in this lecture series, that people were thinking things like that.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that Marlo and his friends, like, he was picked up a lot and let go. People think he was probably a spy, so I don't know.
Oh.
But he certainly evaded an awful lot of pickups where his friends didn't, and they were tortured and things, and this never happened to him.
Oh,
So, but they used to make fun of like the virgin birth. They used to make fun of, you know, really a lot of fun of that, you
Yeah.
know, and like different concepts, but they didn't exactly say that they didn't believe in God. There were like very few people that said that, even when they were like among themselves and joking around.
Oh, yeah, Ben Franklin too.
But there had to be,
Yeah.
that there had to be some atheists, and they probably just were quiet because, you know, it's very dangerous, you would be tortured, and, you know, people did not tolerate atheists for a long time.
Plus, go ahead.
I have a question about why it took until the 19th century for both someone like Darwin and someone like Gregor Mendel to say, you know, we have evolved from earlier forms, and the inheritance follows this ratio of 1 to 3, or, you know, 1 to 4.
Maybe the scientific ideas hadn't, you know,
What
like.
scientific idea? I mean, you could speculate, you could watch, you didn't have to have any advanced training or any advanced scientific evidence, instruments. to say, gee, you know, there's a blonde in my family, and my grandmother was also blonde, or whatever. So why was it that it took so long for them to actually get it? I don't understand. These people were breeding animals for, 10,000 years. They've been breeding animals and plants and dogs,
Yeah.
and everything. So
Well, maybe the human mind wasn't ready to accept the fact that you could do this with humans.
yeah, I mean, I give Darwin a lot of credit. It's not like I'm trying to take it away from him, but it just doesn't seem to make much sense that, someone 100 years earlier couldn't have done this.
Well, but they didn't. That was
But they
Dawkins'
didn't.
point.
Well, they,
That was Dawkins' point. They didn't for some reason, for
But-
whatever reason. Probably,
yeah, were they so influenced by their contemporaries that they couldn't think outside the box?
Exactly, that's a good point, yeah. Because, the Darwin thing is kind of paradigm shattering again.
And I started reading Lucretius.
Oh, wow,
Oh,
that's so
my
terrific.
You mentioned
Upcoming lecture.
You mentioned-
Epicureans.
the fitness, or fit enough, and Lucretius alludes to something
Yeah.
about
Yes, he does.
Yeah, the
that
Epicureans.
each of the kind in nature are fit
Yeah,
for their purpose.
yeah. They knew it kind of. The Greeks
And-
knew it a little bit, but they didn't know it enough.
And he's hinting around at
Well,
selection.
that's about all they could do. That's about all, that was as
Yeah.
far as they could get, and it was very unusual.
But I was impressed with, that's the kind of thinking that I was hoping we would have found earlier in history. That-
No, you don't. You really don't.
But he's hinting at this idea that the reason that they're here is because they're fit to be here.
Yeah, also, you notice as you go along, then you'll find that he shows how societies evolve and things, and language. So they're thinking. But there's that, when Greece was finished, the ancient Greece, you didn't have much for a while, until at least about, like the Renaissance, at least in Europe,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were all kinds of ideas circulating all over the world, but in Europe. It's incredible how long it's taken us. There's a atheist, I can't remember, he's like a very good scientist, I think in England or somewhere. He makes a claim that with the Dark Ages and how the church kept everything back for so long, that I think I forget how many deaths he calculates has come from that. I'm not sure. Well, because the medicine didn't develop very
yeah.
well, et cetera, yeah. Yeah, but I think it's kind of like begging the question, it didn't happen,
Yeah, it's incalculable.
Yeah, but he calculated.
This
One more.
Huh?
this rise to
Good point.
Yeah,
against evolution, do you see this is just as a backlash movement rather than a true religious belief? Isn't it more that this is a defense against modernity
yeah.
rather than this is a sincerely held belief?
Well, I think it's both for some people, and then for others it's a political ploy. I think some of these politicians maybe don't really believe it, but it's a good position to take. It gets votes and money, and then I think that, some people do hate modernity, and they, I don't know.
Because, I mean, even the Big Bang Theory doesn't get as much negative attention as evolution does and attacks.
No,
They could say, well, God started the Big Bang.
yeah, they do. I mean,
Indeed, they would, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they do,
but
yeah.
to say, oh, well, we have a common ancestor with the ape, it
That
seems to
really
be much
upsets people.
more triggering
Yeah.
of a reaction.
Yeah.
I'll make some comments about that.
My mother always used to ask, she was like really mixed up about that, even though she was agnostic. And so she'd always ask, so do you really think people came from apes,
Yeah.
It was like a questioning thing, not a negative, but it's like,
Because she had heard it maybe somewhere. that-
yeah, and then you'd explain evolution to her,
Yeah.
and she'd say, well, that's creepy, She just found it. So I think a lot of people
Right.
just, they can't get their minds around it or don't want to. It's like not what they were taught when they were kids. It's just too alien.
So do you think that creationism and ID has actually made evolutionary science better, and that they had to be on guard for everything that they say?
Yeah, I think it has in that sense, Norm, but the problem is that it's gaining a certain amount of popularity or credence with you know, the American population, you know, less people accept evolution now than they.
And as we found out in your lecture, it's creeping in Europe too.
Yeah, and now it's creeping in Europe. I mean, you know, this is kind of scary.
Well, you gave the stat 40.
Yeah, it used to
down
be
from 45,
45,
but
well,
you-
that's a lot.
It's not a lot. I mean,
See,
it's.
well, you look at how
you
the
could-
number of the US population, what's 5%?
Well, the
You're a
absolute-
mathematician.
Yeah, it's the population, 300 million,
Yeah.
What is it 300 million?
Over that, yeah,
So-
about 300
15
million.
million.
So, what, yeah, oh, see, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, but, so you would be more concerned that it is so low, people believe in, accept evolution, it's so low
Yeah.
percentage-wise, whether it's 40 or 45%.
Yeah.
I'm not, I
It's
I
scary.
myself am not so concerned that it's gone down by, you know, the 5% or the 10% that it's gone down. However, the fact that there's only that and not 90%.
Well, yeah,
80%,
yeah, it's
90%.
not. But you know what? You know, these people will be sitting on school boards, and they're also, a lot of them are parents. And, you know, they're gonna be telling their kids that they don't have to pay attention to evolution or what have you.
That's not important. Another thing that
Well,
is
it's
scary
wrong.
scary
We'll just tell
about
them
it
it's
is
just
if
wrong.
you have 40% of the population believing, yes, I accept the tenets, that makes sense, evolution makes sense. But 60% of them are not, then you have 60% of the people less supportive of science in general.
Mhm. Yeah, in general.
And that
That's
holds
scary.
back the civilization.
I wasn't sure I believed that figure right away. I'd like to know exactly what question was asked.
Yeah. What was
Yeah.
the question?
Yeah, that's true, it's how a question is asked.
Yeah, that's
or
true
something.
too.
But I think it's
I think
been
we'll-
pretty
I
consistent.
think you'd be surprised.
Every time that they run a survey.
Oh, I believe the down 5%. I just don't know
Yeah.
that I believe 40, in the 40s versus in the 70s.
Oh, okay, I don't think it's
Mhm.
anywhere near 70, to
think
tell
it's
you the
anywhere
truth.
near
I wonder how many of those 60s are just, I don't know, lady, go away.
Well, that's true,
I'm tired
too.
of your survey.
That's
you
true,
know.
too.
Oh, that's, yeah, the attitude, yeah.
The editor of the Nation, what's her name now? I can't remember her name. Her husband's a
I
sociologist.
don't read it.
I know, you don't like it. She has said for years that her husband's driven her crazy because he's a sociologist and he keeps telling her that the surveys that show that people, you know, believe in God, so they're so high in the United States, he says that they're not really accurate because what people are saying when they're asked a question like that really is they're saying, I'm a good American, I'm a good citizen. You know, they really, you know, they really aren't that concerned about religion. They're just trying to say I'm a good person.
So you would need some other measure that was not simply a direct question by a stranger.
Yeah, I don't know how you
Some other-
could ask it. I don't know how you could ask it, you know.
Measure, I don't know either, but something to think about. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on just exploring why it is that there is such a strong backlash. What is it about evolution itself that represents the biggest challenge, you know, to the religious people?
That man was not made in God's image, and that
So-
makes, that
well,
reduces
that's-
us to, you know, like, it reduces that.
It's reductionist.
Yeah, right.
And then what about also the concept of reward, that we're not actually being rewarded, that we're random? in
Yeah,
our,
that's scary. A lot of people don't like
path.
that. You know, because, I mean, all right, you can be afraid of hell, but you figure, well, if you're like a good person, you probably won't go to hell. And a lot of Christians have abandoned the idea of hell now. You know, I mean, they just like, we're gonna go to heaven, you know.
That if this is all chance, then it's meaningless, because it's just
Exactly, it's meaningless.
It's an
You're
accident.
gonna be born and you're gonna die, you're not gonna see your relatives in heaven.
And you've come across that already in Croesus.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and it's scary.
The
It's very
chance
scary.
of
I mean, who
atoms.
likes to look, I mean, who likes to think that they're gonna die and not live on? I mean, you know, you notice most religions, you know, present that, you know, immortality and then a sense of justice, the wicked will be punished. So
Justice.
all those guys that have been bad and everything, like, they'll get it in the end. We love to think that, don't we? But they don't.
Yeah, so this idea of survival of the fittest is completely opposite of that.
Yeah,
Is who's the better hunter or killer or,
yeah,
you know, rather than, oh, God was watching over all of his creation.
and cares about
And
what, the
cares
fall
about
of
all
the
of the-
smallest fucking
The
sparrow,
weak,
yeah.
you know, in Christianity, the weak
Yeah.
and the meek,
Will inherit the earth.
Will inherit the earth, and
There
that's
you
not
are.
true.
And that
It's
everybody
strong.
likes that, sense of justice. We'll get ours in the next
Yeah.
life. Keeps everybody in place too, you know.
And then plus this idea that we're just basically animals, we're hairless animals,
Exactly.
must have been very threatening to them.
Well, I haven't tuned in for years, but I used to tune in once in a while to see what Rush Limbaugh was up to. And he was actually one day saying, you know, I'm not an animal, ladies and gentlemen, and neither are you. And his audience probably loved it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he's saying we are not animals, you know, we are something, we're special creation.
Yeah, Dennis Prager would say that.
Ah,
He's also
okay.
the Jewish equivalent, I think, of Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Is, you know,
Pat
I haven't heard
Robertson,
it.
on the other hand, he may be an animal.
Yeah, he is an animal. He's gotten a little senile too.
But I also noticed on these radio shows like Bob Duco on the Catholic radio station.
Yeah, I never listened to him.
He and others like it, they acknowledge microevolution now. They say there is the fact of microevolution, that bacteria evolves. They've accepted that and acknowledge it almost in order to dismiss everything else.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's
But they're
clever.
no longer
They-
arguing about that.
They can't give it up. They don't want to give up God.
So, but it's a very careful strategy to say, well, yes, but I will agree with you only as far as I'm forced to,
Yeah.
and then I will dismiss it, and if you have any gaps in your knowledge, I will then dismiss it.
Yeah.
And this is what comes back then when they say, well, there is no evidence for how the first single cell came into existence. So how can you talk about evolution because you can't even tell me how that first cell came
in
in?
there.
But tell them not to get too close to the labs
Yeah.
that are working today as we speak
Yeah.
here on bringing together all the
But-
chemical elements that all of a
And
sudden,
we will have
this
a cell.
thing starts to grow.
Yeah, we are going to have.
But he says
So
it
it's-
hasn't happened under the most perfect laboratory conditions.
They
You still
say it
have-
all the
draw
time,
the
but it
proteins
doesn't mean
together.
that it won't happen.
Yeah.
See,
But
they say it hasn't
There
happened.
are indications that
It
yes,
hasn't
indeed,
happened.
it is going to be happening.
Yeah,
And very damn
And then,
soon.
and then you know what? It's like, who's that professor that we heard? He's the local guy. He wrote "Why I'm an Atheist."
Robert, why am I an atheist?
Or well, I can't remember. Or like Life is Good as an Atheist.
The
whatever.
Jewish,
Yeah.
former Jew or the
Yeah.
Jewish atheist?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Okay, well, anyway, he was saying, because he spoke, I think at the Rochester Library, I can't remember, but anyway, so we went and heard him again.
Yeah.
And he elaborated more, and he said that they're pushing, they're being pushed, from like the front room to the, thing, and now they're like near the back door. As these scientific, breakthroughs take, so he said they keep being pushed back, and I think he's right. It's taking forever. I always liken it to the serpent's tail. The serpent is dying, and it's like very, very lethal and very, very dangerous.
Yeah,
Well, a lot of
and another program that's been, they just celebrated this in an experiment, in a public demonstration, the hamburger. Where was it? Where did that take place?
Oh yeah, where they made a hamburger.
They took a cell, beef cell, and grew it, kept growing it, muscle tissue.
Yeah.
And kept growing it and modifying it, and finally got a batch of it to grow to enough to make a hamburger.
Is that right?
And they cooked it and ate it. As a public demonstration, it's possible to make artificial meat.
They're gonna have to one of these days, because it's ruining the environment. Isn't that fascinating?
Why, can't put that on an
So
altar and burn it.
is gene manipulation that caused it to replicate the way it did?
Mhm. They manipulated the genetic material and got it to this took years, taken years, to the point where they, it would give them the taste and so forth.
But
And
nobody really liked it, even though
but
it
nobody
tasted like
liked
it,
it.
because
What do you mean?
I think it was the psychology of it.
But there wasn't enough fat. Fat content.
I would think you can always add fat.
You mentioned Watson and Crick. There was a colleague, she was PhD, she was a Jewish woman who I I heard about a play that was written about her, that she was unfairly discredited, she wasn't given credit. Watson and Crick were both publicity seekers. They both wanted to be the first to so-called, unravel the mystery of life. I wouldn't say that they did that, but do you know about this woman? I forget her name.
I saw
Rosalind
something.
Franklin.
Thank
Could
you.
you maybe fill us in on her?
She was into X-ray crystallography.
Yes.
One of the ways of analyzing a chemical, you get it to crystallize, and you shoot X-rays all over the place, and you get your images, and you start deducing things. Well, if I get a crest when it comes from north to south, and I get another crest a different way when it goes east to west, and you do the math on all of this stuff, you can kind of get a picture of what that crystal inside must look like, what each little element, each little repeating element of the crystal must look like. And she wasn't as close to the real discovery as Watson and Crick were, but she was there. She was working in the same lab, Cavendish, and they went in the, what's that book, The Double Helix, I guess, is Watson's book. He mentioned her a number of times, and we got, some of Rosie's results from the X-rays, and that suggested that we look in this direction. And it was much later that people decided that she deserved more credit than she'd been given. I think Watson at least halfway admitted that.
Ah.
He in his book, he describes her as being not very good looking and having thick glasses.
They didn't like women.
And she didn't have any glasses. She
Really?
never wore glasses.
You're kidding me.
That was an image that Watson had got in his mind.
A psychological thing, yeah.
But she wasn't their assistant, she was an
No,
independent
that's correct.
of their team.
That's correct, right.
Yeah, this is why I do believe, it sounds like she
So
deserves
what
more
was
credit.
what was the play? I remember vaguely that there was some kind of.
Was at the Jewish Ensemble Theater.
We should have gone to see it.
It was only peripheral interest, but I feel that based on what you just said and also what I heard, is that yes, she didn't get enough credit, and Watson and Crick were rushing to be the first. They had a plan in the pub that they went to. They were going to be the
They had
first.
Linus Pauling on their ass in the U.S. Linus Pauling, the demigod.
Oh, yeah,
Linus
he really
Pauling
was, yeah.
was working away himself trying to analyze
Yeah.
DNA. They had to beat Pauling.
Yeah, that's like Darwin had to beat Wallace.
Yeah.
I don't like that type of science because
Well,
the best science does not come out of that.
You know what? They are competitive,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not like these pure,
Right.
guys
They-
that sit in the lab and just.
They overstate their claims, they don't fully understand.
Well,
what
nowadays
they're-
it's becoming really bad because there's all
Bad
these,
news.
they're like just they're
From-
plagiarizing papers, they're making up
making
theories.
up data.
You can't replicate those theories and
Yeah.
then they're
Yeah.
disgraced.
Yeah, interesting.
It's gotten
Thank you for
bad.
that name, I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
thank you,
Franklin,
that's
I
really
forgot.
good.
See if I have any other comments in all my notes here. The other thing, the other strategy, back to the creationists, or now the ID people, is that they portray themselves as victims, that they are actually being censored because
Oh, yeah.
they're trying to point out the gaps in the science, and they are innocent victims, that they're just trying to do science better, they're just trying to be more scientific.
The religious all do that. They
Yeah.
keep saying that, now they're defending religious liberty.
Yeah.
So, like, this country doesn't offer an enormous amount of religious liberty and respect.
But it's an
pathetic.
interesting strategy, if they could say, no,
Sure.
I'm more of a scientist than you are,
Yeah.
because I want to point out where you're bad
Yeah.
in your science.
Yeah.
It's a different strategy than just saying, no, you're wrong, or, you're ignoring the theology.
Yeah.
This is saying, no, I'm the scientist, you're not as good a scientist as
It
I am.
was clever. It was
This is
clever.
Ben
Thank goodness
Stein.
that judge,
Yeah, we had Judge Jones, luckily at the right time.
Yeah.
But that Ben Stein.
Thank President Bush for that appointment.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a Bush
Oh,
appointment.
you thank him.
Yeah.
If I voted, I don't think I voted for him. But, yeah.
No, we didn't vote for
I
it.
didn't vote for him.
I know you wouldn't. Ben Stein did that documentary about that the public schools were being unfair to the creationists. That
You know, I
this
didn't
was
see
a-
that.
This was a plot of censorship, that they were trying to censor the free expression of ideas, and how dare you say that we can't give our opinion.
Well, see, this is the
I'm
thing,
the
this is
victim
the
here.
idea of like American fair play.
Yeah.
Americans
Yeah.
hear that and they say, well,
That's what
you
they
know,
do.
like, let both sides,
Let both
let
sides
people
decide.
decide, you know, what's right. You know, they don't understand that, you know, one is science and the other one is not testable, it's not replicated, it doesn't have any validity. They do not
Teach the
understand.
controversy, they
Yeah,
say.
yeah, exactly. It's really pathetic, yeah. And again, you know, as I said in my lecture, that people said Americans are not well educated in civics anymore. They don't understand the separation of church and state.
Speaking of civics, though, I have to say that if I were a civics teacher in a high school, and I wasn't scared to lose my job
That's
if
the
I could
trouble.
do what I wanted,
That's the trouble.
I would always tell my kids about what's going on with the creationism versus evolution. It's a part
And
of
you
the
might
Oh,
lose
yeah.
your, and you might lose your
century,
job,
you
or
know.
you might get.
I wouldn't do it in science.
Yeah.
If I were a science teacher, I wouldn't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But if I were a civics teacher, I'd want the
Sure.
kids to know about that.
Sure,
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
social
but they're
studies.
monitoring things. I mean, they even monitor some college classes to see, you know, what people are saying.
Are there any cases right now working through the courts on evolution in the schools?
You know, I don't know, but I don't think so. Although there's usually something. Americans United has a case every second practically. If you got, I don't know, are you a member, Norm, or not?
No, I'm not. You've given me a couple of their newsletters.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
newsletters. I don't know if you've ever looked at them. I mean,
They're
there's a
filled with,
they're
cases.
just everything. So I guess you could say that there's
Every
cases
month.
working through the courts.
Okay, good.
Yeah, continuously.
But they're not atheists, so I don't think I would join them. But
Well, I mean, but some of the members are atheists.
yeah, that's
They're
good.
a mix.
I growing up Catholic, I remember Protestants and Other Americans United. That
Okay.
was their original name.
Okay, okay.
They were the enemy.
Yeah, I bet that they were the enemy. Yeah, yeah.
What was the Protestant reason for having this type of separation?
From the Catholic point of view, it was, we are running Catholic schools. We, the Catholic parents, are all contributing, you know, every Sunday toward Catholic schools.
Sure.
And we would like to get a little help from the government too, or a lot of help.
Which they've
just
got.
like the public
Yeah.
schools are getting. And they couldn't get it. And the people who were most standing in their way was POAU,
Yeah.
Protestants and Other Americans United.
And then they changed their names.
They changed their
They
name.
made it straight Americans.
Well, because now
United.
I mean, everybody's into it. I mean, you can be an atheist, agnostic,
Oh, yeah,
Jew,
I
you
know.
know. It's-
Yeah, I know, and that's what.
I like it because there's so many members and there's, you know, people contribute and, you know, they're able to take these cases to court and they're able to like bring cases like with the ACLU and other groups. Whereas I think some of our atheist groups are, you know, smaller and more endangered. They don't have as much money.
Yeah, they don't
It's
have
not
as
their
much money.
fault.
They don't have as much, a better organization, they have poor leadership, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, Americans United, I mean, Barry Lynn is a really good spokesman. You know, if you ever hear him, I mean, he knows how to take advantage of a soundbite.
God bless them.
Yeah.
Very good at public appearances.
I don't know,
Very good.
I hate the fact that they, you know, have like all kinds of Christians in it, but those Christians are contributing.
But where does his passion come from? Why is this so important to him and to the religious?
I don't know it.
Separation
so-
of church and state, because they do not want the government being in any kind of position to come back and say, we helped you, now you have to help us.
They don't want to be obliged to.
Yes.
Well, you know, because
And
that's what
we don't
happens
want,
the minute the
they don't want
government.
the government to be able to
Yeah.
say, we want you to include this about how good we are in your sermons.
Interesting.
They, of course, would never be said that way, but that's the idea. Yeah.
I want to suggest a field trip for us too, because the Birmingham Village Players is doing Inherit the Wind.
Oh, that's right,
Play
this
this
fall,
fall.
right? Yeah, okay.
So
yeah.
let me
In the
know
fall?
when that is.
Yeah, so please, yeah.
If you've ever seen
Come
the
along.
play.
Yeah, I want to
movie,
see that, that's fun.
That'd be a lot of fun, and we could hold up signs.
Yeah, that isn't gonna,
We could
that
sing
isn't gonna fly.
creationist protest. How dare you put on this play? This is blasphemy.
I was talking to this poor woman who, you know, an atheist at the meeting, who said that she couldn't come out where she worked.
Oh, I believe that.
Oh, I believe that.
You know,
I
mean,
believe
she-
that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize, I mean, I
Oh, a
worked
lot
for
of
many
people can.
years, and I don't know that too many people ever asked me what I believed.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily come up.
It depends
And I
on
didn't
where-
walk around with signs
Yeah.
or anything, but I don't think
Never
I
come
ever
up.
felt that I couldn't answer honestly.
Yeah.
It depends where you're working though, you know.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, didn't somebody have difficulty, saying at some kind of dinner with his boss and his wife and things that,
Oh, yeah, that was,
he was an atheist? And,
I know who that was.
yeah.
I don't want to say his name.
Yeah, and that he was an atheist, and then, he said his boss's wife came like during the lunch hour or something, like at work, and
The next
talked to
Monday.
him about, Christianity and believing
Oh, yeah.
and stuff,
Okay,
yeah.
I do remember that.
And then, I think, and then she asked him again, he ran into her in the hall, and, at another time, and he told her he was thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because he got nervous, I mean, because obviously the boss approved of that. I mean, all of a sudden she appears, she didn't come
Yeah.
that often.
Did he get fired eventually?
No, he
Oh,
didn't
no.
get
He
fired,
didn't get
as
fired.
far as
So-
I know, no.
Well, then that sort of supports the idea that you can come out. I mean,
Well, no,
you might-
because he had to tell her that he was thinking about it.
You might, yeah, you might get
I might have a
asked.
change of heart,
I always used to tell people I'm an agnostic, which in a way is
Yeah.
true. It's not that I think I have a conclusive mathematical proof of the non-existence of God.
Well, see, that's what I always
But-
tell Norm, I always tell Norm that, it's just.
It's an
someti-
apology though.
Well, it's not really an apology. For years, I mean, when I was younger, I was going with the dictionary thing. I mean, I was an atheist, but I was looking at the dictionary thing, and I knew I couldn't prove it. So, and Dawkins says the same thing, that technically he's an agnostic.
But we just said how strident he was, how
Yeah.
boisterous he was
Yeah, but
about.
scientifically, he says that he can't, you can't prove it.
He's not a linguist, and he's just misunderstanding.
No, it isn't really a
The
misunderstanding.
strong
It is-
atheist.
It is an apology, I agree.
It's an apology. He's British. British they don't want to rock the boat, even though he
Okay.
rocks the boat.
Neither do I.
It's
Well, a lot of us don't,
It's
yeah.
contextual, it's cultural, it doesn't make any sense in terms of 100 years from now, we're not gonna be arguing about whether you're an agnostic or an atheist, because so many people will be
Yeah.
atheists.
Yeah, I say agnostic because I don't need to piss you off, and it's none of your business, and, let's all smile and move
Basically, I
on.
mean, if it's not people I know very well and I don't care, I just tell them I'm not
Well,
religious.
If you don't wanna use the word, you say, I don't believe in God.
I just say I'm not religious.
Not religious.
I'm not religious, I would say that too.
I mean, most people I don't wanna talk to that long. I mean, so, if
Yeah.
it comes up at all, I just say I'm not that religious. But I mean, like, here's another example. You didn't see it, Norm, but, we have a new, picture in our thing, and we were at.
Oh, my God.
We were in Royal Oak, and it was one of those like little shops, and they had a lot of like, a little section with religious things, but among those that Dimitri saw, and then I saw, and then Jim saw, was what Dimitri and I had been talking about how the goddesses, the pagan things, were incorporated with the Virgin Mary and what have you, and Jesus. So there's this thing with the Virgin Mary in color on the side, and then there's a Greek goddess here in the center.
Faded.
And
Faded.
and then down below there's
Very
like this
ambiguous, very ambiguous.
it's like the artist was saying things about evolution. That's what Dimitri thought right away.
Bam, picked up on it.
So we
immediately.
loved it, and it was like a decent price. So we bought it. He wanted to buy it. He wanted to buy it, but he didn't want to transport it or have it sent back to California. And then he was outside the shop, and we walked out with it. He said, "Did you buy it?" I said, "Yeah, we bought it." I wanted it, so.
That sounds cool. I wish I'd bought it
It
ahead
was
of you.
cool, but guess what happened? Because the first thing you kind of see is a virgin, and then you realize that,
Hey,
this-
wait, if there's some other elements. in
yeah,
there.
that there's these other elements, and here's this like ape down below.
And then you
So
see
weird.
the almost Greek, picture. off faded though.
She understood
The
the
artist was very clever with that.
Yeah.
And down below, really faded, is
It's a saint.
almost humanoid.
Yeah.
Not beyond an evolved ape.
But it's hard, they're hard to see at first.
Yeah.
It's so clever, and the Virgin Mary is
Hominid
like
is the
in
correct
color,
word,
you
I
know?
believe.
Yeah, that's what.
Hominid.
Come to say, so clever, you know, and, you know, Dimitri said right away, he said that this is just what we were talking about. He said, this is this artist's view of evolution. He said he's trying to say something.
But that reminded me another objection that perhaps was there about evolution unconsciously or below the surface, was that the idea that the pagans or the animists understood that the animals had some kind of soul,
Yeah,
and that we had a connection with these.
Yeah.
These animals were our ancestors.
yeah, but
It
they
was a
didn't,
pagan idea.
but they really didn't believe
Oh,
that. A lot of pagans did not believe that.
Well, what about the Native Americans?
That, you know, I don't know their religion very well.
That the
Oh, they
buffalo.
were very much into that.
They had the
probably were
idea of
into
the
that.
spirit,
That-
the
that-
animal
Spirit.
spirit.
Yeah, the
Spirit.
pagans really didn't have that though very much.
But wouldn't.
Well, they had to get permission to kill the buffalo before they went on the buffalo hunt.
The Greeks had a lot of myths about
Yeah.
the gods, you know, like creating, you know, the first man and woman, you know, sewing some bones and then they would turn out to be humans, you know, that kind of thing.
And
But
did any of the gods
Indians,
have
maybe.
animal features, though? Didn't.
Well, now that's Indian and
That's
things,
Indian,
and
that's
I
not
don't
Indian.
understand that kind of, you know, I don't have that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was not Greek.
Well,
I
that was
just-
not Greek at
I'm
all.
just trying to think of other ways that this idea that we came from animals would have been so threatening to the Christians, that this, beyond the obvious that it contradicts the Bible, there's this emotional, visceral response that says, you know, I'm not an animal, or I'm not a pagan, I'm not an animist.
Yeah.
Remember that
They don't-
in Christianity, we're made in the image of God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
They
that raised us.
Yeah, they really
Well, I
should
mean,
say,
you know, like I
God
said,
is
the
made in the
Greeks,
image.
you know, they're,
That these were their ancestors. These forms were earlier forms of themselves, of their own people. Was in the
Mhm.
people, was now in the, represented by these animals that they saw. They came from these animals, just like what Darwin would have said.
Fascinating. But I do remember from my Boy Scout days, the idea that there was a big hunt, or we're going out on a hunt. They had to get, not we, the Indians, that the Indian must get permission in order to kill brother rabbit, brother elk,
rabbit.
brother thing. Please accept this arrow. My family is hungry. I must feed them. And forgive me for, taking your life. Well,
Because
brother,
the animal had some
brother
kind
fish,
of
brother.
consciousness,
Mhm.
had
Yeah.
some either
Yeah.
soul or
Yeah,
consciousness.
have to
you
get
could
that
appeal to.
going. Yeah, that back and forth kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting.
Another thing that has been observed is when there were hunts in olden times, you could only throw something so far to hit a larger thing like an elk or a zebra or whatever the thing would be. Better to let the lions do it and go in and, after they're finished, get it. But you have to get really close to the animal.
To actually take its
You
life.
actually literally have to
Yeah.
touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're doing that, you're really in communication with the darn thing.
Yeah, you see it suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a connection between you and that animal, if you don't get trampled with the hooves. If you survive all that, there's that communication, the communion type of thing. What else is there in there? I could see where you could get animal worship. You could get your gods then could look like animals.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the people in Darwin's day must have been aware that there were some people who had this belief that the animals were our ancestors.
But they thought that those people were heathens.
Yeah, they were, yes, but that's what would make evolution, which sounded similar, so scary.
That's a good point, yeah.
That, oh, I know you, you're one of those animal worshipers that believe your ancestors, your spirit, the ancestors are these animals. And Wallace Stevens, he was a religious man, wasn't he?
No, he was not. That's like a.
Is that a myth?
Yeah, when he was in the hospital, some priest claimed that he had
for
converted.
goodness. Oh, I remember that.
Because even somebody repeated that to me, that he was.
I'm not surprised. I mean, that mythology has kept on, you know, and his daughter said that this did not happen. And on top of it, when they, you know, did anything like that, like a baptism and a conversion or anything like that, it was always registered, like, you know, in the priest's office or whatever they call it.
In the Bible?
Yeah, well, not in the Bible, but they had a registry, and
Okay.
whatever, and there's no registry of that. So that priest was, you know, obviously making that up. He was an atheist all his life.
Stevens.
Yeah, I would find it very weird if he converted at the last minute, even if he was scared, you know. There's an awful lot. Helen Vendler, who's like a really well-known English critic, has really kind of put paid to that myth. But who told you that recently?
It was actually repeated in one of the books that I listened to on tape, so I don't remember.
Which book?
If I can think of it, I'll let you know.
That infuriates me. Every time I think of
They
it.
they tried to say that Darwin was the atheist and not Stevens. That isn't that interesting that Stevens had a religious belief. After all, he came up with the same idea. Which also makes me wonder why
Wallace
was it
Stevens? Oh, you're thinking of Wallace, the evolutionary guy.
not Wallace? Yes.
I was thinking of Wallace Stevens,
I'm
a
sorry.
poet.
I'm sorry.
No, I don't know
What's his
anything
first
about
name?
Wallace, actually. Edgar Wallace, yeah, Edgar Wallace.
Okay, my mistake.
You know what, I don't know anything
My
about
mistake.
his
Wallace,
beliefs. I'm
his last
sorry.
name.
I freaked out because
I think I
really
said
kept-
Wallace, and then you said Wallace Stevens, and I
Oh,
remembered
okay,
Wallace Stevens.
okay, I know, because
Yeah,
that's an old
Wallace.
canard about Stevens, and you know, a lot of nuns and stuff, not a lot, but several nuns
Okay.
and things did like doctoral theses on Stevens, because
Yeah.
he was a religious.
I wrote down Wallace. So let me dig that out. I think that
You
that
know, I
could
don't
be
know what
true.
religion Wallace was.
That they said he was a moderate Christian.
He might have been.
Wasn't that interesting that he would come up with this idea? But what's more interesting to me is that it was independent of Darwin, but yet at the same decade or
Yeah.
There's a lot of scientific things
You-
like that. You know,
But so what were they building on? You didn't really
Yeah.
say what were they
Any
building
idea?
It is
Peter?
curious. No, I don't. I mean, you can say for Darwin, it was the breeding, pigeon breeding,
Yeah.
the dog breeding, everything
Yeah.
else that he was familiar
Yeah.
with. Well, was Wallace familiar with the same stuff? I don't know.
I don't know either. I
He
don't
was
know
a
anything
field
about it.
biologist. Wallace did a lot more work in the field, collecting.
Well, then maybe
See, I
it
don't
was
know
just
what-
his observation.
He was collecting things for rich collectors. He would
Remember
sell.
now, people were building on stuff. You notice like in the last lecture where we talked about how, you know, the geology, how weird their geology was for a while. They were always like, what do they call it, mosaic biology, not mosaic geology, where they were trying to prove about the flood and everything. And, you know, they were, you know, pretty formidable. So people haven't really realized that these changes took place with gradual floods and gradual. Thank you very much for a wonderful discussion.